My daughter, Camilla Marin, lifted the microphone with a smile so bright it almost hid the cruelty underneath. I was seated near the back of the reception hall along the San Antonio Riverwalk, close enough to hear every word but far enough that no one would notice me unless they were looking for someone to forget. She took a slow breath, eyes shining with certainty. I owe everything to my mother-in-law, she announced. My own mother never mattered. The applause rose instantly warm, polite, oblivious. I felt Rosa, my closest friend, stiffen beside me, but I didn't look at her. The words themselves were enough to steady me. 68 years of carrying this child through sickness, loneliness, and every kind of scarcity. And now I was nothing more than an inconvenient detail she wanted to scrub out of her story. Camila continued smiling, basking in the glow of approval. Linda Herrera, her new mother-in-law, dabbed theatrically at the corner of her eye, as though she had just been crowned Queen of Generosity. The scene would have been almost funny if it hadn't sliced straight through my chest. I stood before I knew I had moved. Chairs creaked. A few heads turned. No one spoke. Camilla's smile faltered. "Mama, what are you?" I stepped up to her, letting the murmurs swell behind me. My voice stayed steady, almost gentle. "I brought you a small gift." Her eyes flicked down at the black box in my hand, the one I had carried since morning. She hesitated, as if sensing weight far heavier than cardboard and ribbon. But she took it anyway. "For you," I whispered, "from what you tried to hide." She opened the lid halfway, just enough to see the corner of a photo, the folded page, the flash drive. Her face drained of color so fast, I thought she might faint. The microphone slipped in her grip. A few guests gasped. I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned, walked toward the exit, and let the whispers rise behind me, carrying her name and mine in the same breath. Outside, the night air felt colder than I remembered. I held on to it as I stepped away from the building, ready to finally return to the beginning of our undoing. San Antonio has never been a gentle city, but it was the place that made me. My parents came from Mexico long before I was born, settling on the south side where rent was cheap and the roofs leaked when it rained. When Camila arrived, I was barely out of my 20s, too young to know what I was doing, too stubborn to admit fear. What I lacked in certainty, I made up for in work. I held night shifts at Methodist Hospital, slipping into scrubs long before sunrise, then rushing home to wake Camilla for school. "Mama, you look tired," she would say, rubbing her eyes while I tied her shoelaces. "I will rest later," I always told her. Later never meant anything specific, just something beyond the next shift, the next bill. The next week, I prayed we could stretch groceries far enough. We lived in a small duplex near Military Drive. The walls were thin enough to hear neighbors fight and laugh, sometimes both in the same hour. Camilla's backpack lived on the couch because we had no space for desks, and she did her homework at the kitchen table while I reheated leftover beans on the stove. On Sundays, no matter how exhausted I was, we walked along the river walk. It was our ritual. She held my hand and pointed at tourists on boats, as if they were characters in a show only she could understand. We shared one concha, tearing it in half. She always gave me the bigger piece. Sometimes I pretended not to notice. When she was 9, she tugged my sleeve as we passed a family dressed in expensive clothes. "They look like they come from another world," she whispered. I told her every world starts somewhere. She nodded. But I saw something shift in her eyes, a hunger for more than small kitchens and secondhand shoes. Years later, when she entered a scholarship program at Alamo Heights, she came home buzzing with stories about houses that looked like museums and classmates who planned summer trips to Europe. She wanted that life. She chased it. I never blamed her for wanting the horizon. I just never expected she would run so far she forgot the starting point. The beginning of the distance between us started quietly, almost softly, before either of us had the courage to name it. Camilla started at Alamo Heights High School with a scholarship envelope still warm from my hands. She held it like proof that she belonged somewhere beyond the tired duplex and the South Side buses we took everywhere. "It is just school," I told her that morning as I brushed a wrinkle from her blouse. "Work hard, and you will be fine." When she came home that afternoon, she was quiet. Too quiet. She dropped her backpack onto the couch and stood there as if she had forgotten how to move. "Did something happen?" I asked. "They all have cars," she muttered. "Real cars, not ones that smell like bleach or sound like they are dying." She rubbed the sleeve of her thrift store shirt. "And their uniforms fit. Mine looks like it belonged to someone else." I tried to smile. "Clothes do not make the student." She nodded, but her eyes said she did not believe me. A week later, she was invited to a birthday party some girl named Alyssa, who lived in a neighborhood with gates taller than anything I had ever seen. I saved every spare dollar for a present, wrapped it in gold paper, and braided Camilla's hair the way she liked. When I dropped her off, the other girls stared at her shoes, the scuffed black pair we had cleaned with vinegar. I saw one girl whisper to another. They laughed behind their hands. Camilla's shoulders tightened. I waited outside in the car. 2 hours later, she stepped in without a word. Her hair was still braided, but her face looked older. "Did you have fun?" I asked. She stared out the window. "They said my shoes looked like something from a thrift bin." My chest tightened. "People can be mean." "Mija, you know that?" She swallowed hard. "You always say that like it makes it hurt less." I reached for her hand, but she pulled it into her lap. I told myself she was tired. I told myself she would forget. But that night, long after she fell asleep, I saw the shoes placed neatly by the trash can. And for the first time, I realized wanting more was no longer just a dream for her. It was a way out of the life I had built. Camila met Daniel during her second year at the University of Texas at San Antonio. She came home one afternoon with a shy smile and said, "I met someone who listens. Mama, really listens. I wanted to be happy for her, and I was..." But there was something in the way she smoothed her hair before saying his name that told me this boy was from a different world. I learned just how different when he invited us both to dinner at his parents' home in the Dominion. The moment we stepped inside, I could feel Camilla stiffen like she was afraid to breathe wrong. The house was filled with glass and polished floors. Too polished. I caught her glancing around, almost checking whether she belonged. Linda Herrera welcomed us with a warmth that felt a little too rehearsed. "Elena," she said, taking my hand in both of hers, "you raised a remarkable daughter." Truly, for a moment, I believed her kindness. Then I watched her eyes rest on Camilla, calculating, assessing, almost choosing, over dinner. Linda leaned toward Camilla. "You mentioned wanting an internship. I know someone at a firm downtown. I could make a call." Camilla's cheeks flushed. I would be grateful." "It is nothing," Linda said. "A young woman with your potential should not waste time waiting for opportunities." After dessert, Linda appeared with a garment bag. "This would look lovely on you for interviews." She told Camilla. Inside was a blazer more expensive than anything I had ever owned. Camilla ran her fingers over the fabric as though it were magic. Later that week, I found a brochure on Camilla's desk for a professional coaching course, 8 sessions, paid in full. Linda said it would help me speak with confidence. She said, almost defensive, "She thinks I can go far." I heard the pride in her voice, pride that did not come from me. In the weeks that followed, Camilla's posture straightened. Her words polished themselves, and her priorities shifted toward rooms I had never entered. When she talked about her future, she said "we," and she meant the Herreras. I told myself I should be grateful someone was helping her rise. But gratitude is hard to feel when you realize you are being replaced piece by piece. I went up to the attic on a day when the house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ribs until you move just to breathe. The boxes were stacked where I had left them years earlier, each one marked in my handwriting. I pulled down the one labeled Camila, school, and carried it to the floor. Inside were the things no one else ever saw. The first envelope held hospital bills from the year she caught pneumonia. I remembered sitting beside her bed while machines hummed, praying the fever would break. "Mama, do not leave," she had whispered, barely awake. I had worked every extra shift I could find to cover the treatments. Under the bills lay a folded sheet of paper. I recognized the edges before I even opened it, her scholarship essay from high school. She had written, "My mother sacrificed everything so I could have choices she never had. I want to make her proud." I traced the handwriting with my thumb. She had forgotten she ever wrote those words. The next item was a small recorder I had kept for years. I pressed play. A 16-year-old Camila sobbed through the static. "Mama, come get me. Please. I cannot be here. I need you." I remembered that night in Peace's rain, headlights, a girl who curled into me like she did when she was small. Beneath it all was a photograph from the hospital. Camila lay pale and sweating, tubes at her nose. I sat beside her, holding an oxygen mask close while she tried to smile for the camera. She had been 12. I had been terrified. I sat in the dust, surrounded by proof of a life she now denied ever needing. She had not simply forgotten. She had rewritten everything. I gathered the bills, the essay, the recording, the photograph, and placed them into a small black box I had kept for keepsakes. If she wanted a story without me, then she would have to look at the one she tried to erase. The morning of the wedding. I stood at the back of St. Joseph Church, watching Camila glide down the aisle on Daniel's arm. She looked beautiful. She always had. But there was a stiffness in her shoulders. I recognized something practiced. Something borrowed from the Herrera family's world. After the ceremony, guests spilled into the reception hall along the Riverwalk. Everything glittered champagne glasses, jeweled centerpieces, Linda's smile. She moved through the room with practiced grace, accepting compliments as if she had choreographed the entire day. She worked so hard for this. Someone whispered behind me. Linda raised her well. I turned, expecting a joke, but they meant every word. Camila joined them, laughing lightly. She didn't correct anyone. She didn't look for me. She leaned into Linda's touch as if she had always belonged there. When the lights dimmed for the slideshow, I took a seat near the back. The first photo appeared Camila as a toddler in pigtails, reaching for a birthday cake. I recognized the moment immediately, but something felt off. It took me a second to notice what was missing: my arm, my shoulder, my whole presence. Every photo that once held both of us had been cropped, so she stood alone. Or so Linda filled the empty space beside her. A picture from her middle school graduation flashed by, Camila smiling proudly. The original had shown me standing behind her, my hands on her shoulders. Now it was just her and a clean blue curtain. Rosa leaned toward me. "Elena, is this a mistake?" "No," I whispered. "It is exactly what they wanted." Another guest clapped Linda on the back. "You must be so proud. You raised such a strong young woman." Linda only smiled and nodded. I felt something inside me go still. Not angry, not shocked, just still, as if watching the final burial of a story I had lived alone. The life I built had disappeared from the screen, and no one in the room even noticed. The moment before everything unraveled began quietly, Camila lifting the microphone, Daniel squeezing her hand, Linda standing a few steps behind them with that poised, polished smile she wore like armor. I sensed what was coming before she even opened her mouth. The air around her felt rehearsed. She started thanking the guests, the supervisors from her company, the Herrera relatives who had flown in. Then her gaze drifted to Linda as if pulled there by instinct. "I owe everything to my mother-in-law," she said. My own mother never mattered. The applause rose too quickly, too easily. Linda placed a hand over her chest as if touched by the honor. My own hands turned cold. I moved before I fully understood I was doing it. Rosa murmured my name, but I was already walking toward the stage. Each step cut through the clapping until the room dipped into an uneasy quiet. Camilla's smile tightened. "Mama, you should sit." "I brought you something," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I placed the small black box in her hand. A few guests leaned forward. Linda's eyes narrowed, calculating. Camilla lifted the lid. This time, she opened it fully. The scholarship essay lay on top, her teenage handwriting in looping curves. Beneath it, the printed transcript of her voicemail, the one where she cried and begged me to come get her. A photo followed Camilla at 12, pale and trembling, while I held an oxygen mask near her face. Then the hospital bill, showing the nights I worked triple shifts to keep her alive. Camilla's breath hitched. Where did you get this? From the beginning you erased." I said. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" Another murmured. She never mentioned any of this. Camilla stood frozen, the box trembling in her hands. For the first time all day, she looked like my daughter, not the polished stranger molded for another family, but the child who once clung to me in hospital hallways. Her world had begun to crack, and she could feel it. I saw it in the way her lips parted, in the way her eyes darted to Linda for help, and found nothing steady there. I stepped back, letting the truth settle between us, heavy enough to bend the air. I had almost reached the parking lot when I heard her heels striking the pavement behind me. "Mama, wait, please," Camilla's voice cracked, the way it used to when she was little and afraid. I stopped but didn't turn. She circled in front of me, breathless, the black box clutched to her chest. "What was that?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. "Why would you bring this here? You erased me in front of every person you care about," I said. "I thought you should see what you erased." Her jaw tightened. Linda said keeping distance would help me rise. She said you would make people question my professionalism. She said investors prefer a clean background. I stared at her, at the woman she had become. A clean background. "You mean a life without me in it?" She winced. "That is not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant." I said. "You built a story where I never existed, and you liked how it looked." Camilla swallowed hard. Her lipstick had started to smudge. She looked younger suddenly, like the girl who used to grab my hand when she crossed streets. "I did not know how to fit into Daniel's world," she whispered. I was ashamed. I did not want to bring the past with me. "You did not want to bring me with you," I said quietly. She shook her head, tears slipping fast. "Linda said it was temporary. She said once the promotion went through, once the wedding settled, I could find a balance. I trusted her." "And you never trusted me." My voice stayed calm. I felt strangely steady, like the truth had given me something solid to stand on. Camilla looked down at the open box. The essay, the photo, the bill, proof of everything she had tried to outrun. "I do not expect forgiveness tonight," she whispered, but I did not know how far I let it go until now. Her voice broke completely. "I do not know how to fix this." I stood there listening, the night echoing with the sound of her unraveling, and for the first time, she seemed afraid of losing something she thought she had already thrown away. For a few days after the wedding, Camilla vanished into silence. When she finally resurfaced, it was through carefully crafted statements on her social media pages long. Polished paragraphs about misunderstandings, miscommunications, and family complexities. She was not defending the truth. She was defending her image. Rosa read one of the posts out loud in my kitchen. "She makes it sound like you ambushed her for no reason," she muttered, as if she had no part in this. "Image is everything in her new world," I said. "Reality comes last." Reality became even blurrier when Linda called me. Her voice was sugar-coated steel. "Elena, I understand weddings stir emotions, but your behavior was erratic. People are concerned. You should step back before you embarrass Camilla further." "Embarrass her," I repeated, "by telling the truth." "You created a scene," Linda snapped. "A stable person would have handled this quietly." Before I could respond, someone else joined the line. "Mom, stop." Daniel's voice. Cold. "I saw your emails. You coached Camilla to hide things. You told her Elena would hold her back." There was a beat of silence, the kind that only happens when a lie collapses. I hung up. Nothing more needed to be said. That night, Rosa sat across from me with a stack of documents spread over the table. Hospital bills, receipts, school forms, copies of emails Camilla had forwarded years ago without thinking. "If you want the truth to stand on its own," Rosa said, "let it stand in the places it matters." So we made a list. First, the Herrera Foundation Ethics Board people who donated money believing in the family's spotless story. Second, the corporate board where Camilla's promotion was under review. Third, Daniel, who deserved to know the full extent of his mother's manipulation. Each envelope was sealed, addressed, and mailed before the sun rose. By morning, the truth was on its way to the people who had always cared more about reputation than integrity. And once they opened those packages, nothing in Camilla's carefully curated world would survive untouched. The first call came from a woman on the Herrera Foundation Ethics Board. Her voice was clipped, professional, shaken around the edges. "Elena, we received your documents. They contradict several narratives Linda has published on behalf of the family." She paused. "We will be conducting a full review within 48 hours. The storm broke." Daniel showed up at my door early in the morning, his shoulders heavy. They confronted her. He said, "My mother." The board pulled every file she ever submitted. They found emails where she told Camilla to rewrite her background. They found fundraiser speeches built on lies. They found your absence used as proof of her rescue. I let him speak because the words were not for me, they were for him. He needed to hear them out loud. "And Camilla," I finally asked. "She is under ethics review at her company," he said. "They found inconsistencies in her professional biography. The promotion is gone." He swallowed. "The Herreras removed her from the inheritance placement. Not legally. Quietly. Socially. It is their way of saying she failed them." He sat down at my kitchen table, head in his hands. "I told her I would not lie for the family. I am done with all of that." Later that afternoon, Camilla came to me. She looked hollow, her confidence stripped down to something raw and unfamiliar. "They think I built my career on fraud," she whispered. "They say I let Linda guide too much of my image. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I was doing what I needed to survive in their world." "You were surviving," I said, "but not living." Her eyes filled. "You did not ruin anything." "Mama, I did this to myself." We stood there in the doorway, the truth settling heavy between us, but cleaner than any apology. That evening, I walked to the edge of the riverwalk and watched the lights shimmer against the dark water. I felt no triumph, only the quiet strength of someone who finally stopped carrying what was never hers to hold. The truth she tried to hide became the truth that finally set me free. If you felt this story, remember to like, leave a comment, or subscribe so more voices like mine can be heard.